Over 100 people have lost their lives searching for the lost city of Z, and to this day, not a single person has proof it even exists. The Amazon jungle is home to countless stories of lost cities and hidden treasure, but it takes a little more than just a rumor to send so many people to their deaths looking for them. The lost city of Z is believed to be an ancient pre-Columbian civilization that was originally thought to be one massive city belonging to a completely separate people from the other major tribes of South and Central America. Since rumors of its existence were made popular in the 1920s, over 100 people have disappeared trying to either find the city itself or those who were lost while searching for it. The first mention of the city was written in 1753 by Portuguese bandeirantes, who were a type of independent explorer and fortune seeker. A document known as Manuscript 512 was written by an anonymous author who was believed to either be a bandeirante or at least someone closely connected with one of their expeditions. It was deposited into the Brazilian National Library in the same year it was written and was largely ignored for over 150 years. It wasn't until 1912 that a British Army officer and explorer named Percy Fawcett came across Manuscript 512 by chance while on an expedition to Brazil. Upon reading the document, he learned of a Portuguese expedition into the jungle that found a huge ruined city made of stone. It described finding a network of paved stone paths winding through arches covered with inscriptions and intricately carved statues lining the paths. Since the city wasn't named in the manuscript, Fawcett simply referred to it as the Lost City of Z in his notes, a name that stuck throughout the years. Fawcett became obsessed with learning more about the city and started to associate it with stories he'd heard from local indigenous tribes who mentioned finding stone remains within the jungle. He also saw pieces of pottery that were supposedly found deep within the jungle and became convinced they came from the Lost City of Z. He determined that due to the estimated location of the city, it couldn't belong to any of the other major tribes of the continent, such as the Incas, who were located far to the west in the Andes Mountains, or the Mayans, who lived far to the north around Guatemala. The possibility of being the one to discover what he believed to be the next major advanced civilization of the entire continent consumed him. It wasn't until Fawcett's fourth expedition to Brazil between 1911 and 1912 that he found Manuscript 512 and learned about the possible existence of a city, but by this time he was already one of the most experienced explorers in all of Britain. After this, he took every opportunity he could to go back to Brazil after learning of a possible lost city, and in 1913 he joined an expedition heading into the jungles of Brazil. The purpose of the expedition was a general deep reconnaissance mission, and searching for the lost city of Z was nothing more than a personal wish of Fawcett. But they found nothing, and the trip was cut short due to disease and the looming prospect of the First World War. Between 1914 and 1918, the world suffered its first global conflict, and any ideas of mounting expensive world explorations were put on hold. But Fawcett's obsession only grew over the years, and in 1920 he once again joined a general exploration mission into the jungles of Brazil. The 1920 exploration found nothing, but somehow led Fawcett to become even more convinced that a city was still out there somewhere. This obsession with the lost city of Z led Fawcett to mount a preparation mission starting in 1921 and lasting for just over 3 years. This was the first expedition to Brazil that was solely focused on the lost city. But this expedition was only supposed to provide the groundwork for an actual attempt later on. Over the 3 years they were there, numerous smaller scouting missions took place. The libraries were searched for any maps or mentions of the city that could help them settle on a final location to search. They spoke to the local tribes and gathered what they believed to be evidence on the best possible location to mount a proper expedition. In 1924, Fawcett headed back home to prepare for an attempt to find the city and also to gather enough funding to allow him to do so. After a series of lectures and small fundraising tours, he finally had everything he needed to mount an expedition of his own, and with no other purpose than finding the lost city of Z itself. In 1925, Fawcett travelled to Brazil with his son, Jack Fawcett, and another friend named Riley Rimmel. The sole purpose of this expedition was to make their way through the jungle to the most likely location of the city. They were exploring the Mato Grosso region, specifically around the Xingu River basin, with their last known location being the Dead Horse Camp, which was their last stopping point before going missing. Fawcett, his son, and their friend all disappeared, and no one has seen any trace of them to this day. It's speculated they either died from disease or succumbed to the many dangers of the jungle, such as hostile tribes and the countless poisonous creatures that dwell within the trees. Percy Fawcett was the single biggest source of collective information on the city, and he did far more than anyone else to make it popular, but he wasn't the only one trying to find it. Over the next 5 years, there were 3 major expeditions launched, all with the purpose of finding out what happened to Fawcett and his companions, but none of the teams found any trace of him or any evidence of the city he was looking for. Because of the hype Fawcett created for the city, there was an increase in searches from independent treasure hunters and lost city enthusiasts throughout the 1930s and lasting well into the 1950s before interest dropped off. Many of these smaller searches saw numerous deaths, mostly from disease or infection, and many more people were lost trying to find those who had disappeared. The total number of people who have died trying to find the city is unknown, as many of the earlier expeditions were poorly documented and simply recorded that there were deaths as opposed to an actual number, but a safe estimate can put the number at no less than 100 lives lost because of the promise of a city hidden in the jungle. To this day, there is no actual definitive evidence that a city big enough to hold its own major civilization existed within the area of the Amazon rainforest that Fawcett believed it did. But there is enough evidence to prove that many people did live within the area of the Xingu River Basin during pre-Columbian times. Many countries and organizations have mounted exploration projects of the Amazon jungle over the years, and it has been conclusively proven that millions of people lived within the jungle in pre-Columbian times. Evidence in the form of roads, earthworks, stone carvings, and the foundations of large settlements has been found, but none come close to the scale of what the lost city of Z is supposed to be. Any pottery Fawcett saw likely came from one of the many smaller tribal settlements that existed long ago, and the original description of the city within manuscript 512 was probably blown out of proportion by Fawcett himself. The closest thing to the lost city of Z would most likely be mistaking several smaller settlements for one larger one, but since the original manuscript didn't give any measurable size references, simply saying a large city could be wildly interpreted by different people. It has been proven that the Amazon had millions of people living across it in pre-Columbian times, but they all existed as small, spread-out cities or individual towns and villages. An advanced and elaborate city of the size proposed by Fawcett seems like nothing more than a fantasy blown out of proportion, and any real evidence of its existence is questionable at best. So unfortunately for Lost City and treasure enthusiasts, the Lost City of Z seems like nothing more than one man's dream. But this doesn't mean that there isn't still plenty to find within the Amazon. Between 2020 and 2025, hundreds of constructions were found across the Amazon, including raised fields and road systems, engineered waterways for farming, and managed forests and gardens. There is still plenty to find out there, and probably plenty of treasure, but the risks of even trying to find it greatly outweigh the rewards. The Amazon swallows lives on a regular basis, and simply being there is a risk in itself. Do you think there may be a lost super city somewhere in the jungles of Brazil, or have we already found all of the major civilizations that ever existed there?